great to have you here.
I had decided I wanted to get into events.
Don't rush into anything.
Left university and pretty much went straight into it.
It's just got to happen. So do what you need to make it happen.
I've never been one to follow rules.
We've spent a lot of time together, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Always keeping up with trends and fads.
How do you manage that, the expectations versus the reality of budgeting?
It's always insightful to get a gauge as to what their reference point is with budget.
Pre-COVID, I didn't know what Zoom was.
You know, everything is done to a higher level.
That detail Jeremy and the band and the guys will go into, by definition, makes our life easier.
There's levels and levels, and that comes in the detail. Hello and welcome to this, our final episode of Season 1 of the Secret World of Events, a view from the top. And I'm delighted to be joined by one of the UK's most successful event photographers, Blake Ezra. Blake is a hugely talented and well-respected photographer who not only photographs some of the most fabulous events you've ever seen, but also has a portfolio that includes celebrities, dignitaries and royalty. Welcome, Blake.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, great to have you on the Secret World of Events. I couldn't do a Season 1 without having you on. Where did photography start for you?
Photography, so it's weird. You know, sometimes things are always there and you never know they're there until you look back and realise it with hindsight. So I definitely was the one out of all my friends who had the camera. You know, there's always one in a group, pre-camera phones. And professionally, it kind of started when I wanted to be a news photographer. I woke up one day and said, I want to be a news photographer.
So no formal training?
No formal training. In the middle of a Middle Eastern studies degree, I thought, okay, I want to be a news photographer and actually communicate messages to lots of people through visuals. So messages can be communicated by words or by pictures. And I thought actually the power of communicating an entire story in one picture is incredible. So no training, no formal education in that space, and lots of chutzpah. Lots of oomph, lots of drive, and that was what I wanted to do.
So you started in news photography, and that's for a whole nother. I mean, in fact, let's get out of the way. You did a show called Human.
Secret World of something else.
No, you did a show called Human, didn't you?
I did.
During lockdown, which covered basically your career as a news photographer and some amazing stories. And if you want to see that, you know, Google Human Blake Ezra and you'll find that somewhere online. It's pretty special. But in terms of event photography, how did you sort of pivot into that world?
So I was doing news photography full time and taking on certain little private commissions for anybody who asked. And there was somebody I'd worked with for a few years photographing something for them. And they approached me. They said, "Look, can we go and get a coffee? I'm getting married next year. I'm sure your photography's okay." It was kind of that sort of praise level. I'm sure photography's fine, but I've seen how you are with people, and I really know that we want you around us on our wedding day. Would you photograph our wedding? We know that's not what you do. And so I agreed to do it and had no idea what I was doing. Thank you, Donna and Mark, for taking a massive gamble. No idea what I was doing. And it kind of spiraled from there. As you know, that can happen and word gets out. And I had these delusions of photographing news and corporate things during the week and then private events at the weekend, which doesn't happen because you need to be dedicated to one or the other, really. And it just grew from there, private events.
So what is it now that it's the mainstay of your business. Of course, you do other things as well, but pretty much it would probably account for what percentage of your time would you say is sort of events and events related?
I would say over 60. 65, 70 maybe.
And the other stuff you do is more corporate related?
It's corporates and portraiture and all sorts of different things for companies, new image libraries, studio work, celebrity portraits, editorials. So it is definitely the majority, but there are many other things that come into what goes into my month or my week.
Now, we've got a library of images that we're going to share with people in just a minute. I want to sort of go into some of the sort of specifics around events and how you work with your clients, because photography is a very big field. There are very many people out there, and it's a big place to compete with. What do you think sort of sets you apart, perhaps from other photographers in terms of style or how you deal with clients? Why should people, choose to work with you?
So it's funny because sometimes people come into meetings with me and they ask that question. And I've been known to flippantly ask them whether my mum is in the room because, if you want somebody to say that I'm the best thing in the world, that's not me, that's my mum. So I don't have a good answer. Again, I don't know how everybody else works. There are certain things in background and approach that I know that I bring to what I shoot. So I think actually I'm really thankful for that couple of years of doing news photography and editorial things, and actually all of that training that came in. That really does mean that I don't feel a lot of pressure. I mean, we've been in enough events together and stood during a wedding ceremony or stood during, before a big entrance of someone into a room, and pressure doesn't really come to me. I think once you photograph riots and situations whereby your life is under threat, photographing events is a joy and a pleasure.
The one thing I will say about working with you, and we do have the pleasure of working with you a lot throughout the years, is you are calmness personified. It doesn't matter what is going on. And by the way, some weddings can turn into a bit of a riot. It does get very stressful outside of us, but you're always very, very calm. How do you sort of keep that calmness when everything else sometimes can be falling apart around you?
So I think it's funny. It's certainly specifically at weddings, I see my role as the photography is a bonus. My job is to be the calmest person in any room, and I think I am. I think there's a few things. Firstly, you can only, as a photographer, or probably also as a videographer, you can only do what you can do. So we are tied by certain circumstances and timings and spaces and personalities and things that sometimes work for you and things that sometimes don't. And of course you can mold those situations in the best way you can. You can prepare as best as you can, but sometimes you can only do what you can do. And I think there's a realization in that. There's a bride who is feeling hugely anxious and hugely stressed. The last thing they need is a photographer saying, come on, we've got to get these shots, and we've got to get, I think really it's about reading a room, reading the people around you, being there for what they need, and doing the best you can to get the best out of them. So,
would you say there's different styles of photography around sort of yourself? Do you are you known for one sort of style? I mean, I feel when I look at your images, I feel that the post-production of the image is as important as the composition of the shot itself. And I think you're very much known with me for that. But from your mind's eye, is that something you look to achieve?
It's not necessarily something I look to achieve. I think we all create things in a way that we find to be the best thing at that time, right? Whether that's a writer writing something, a photographer taking a picture, we all have ideals as to how things should be done. For me, it's not necessarily something I look to achieve, although they're looking through them, actually there clearly is a style, which I've always said there isn't, but clearly there is. I think that a lot of the events that I shoot are difficult to shoot light-wise. And, we're in London. We're indoors a lot, right? Certainly in the winter months, but even in the summer months, we're indoors. And you have to be not only very knowledgeable about how to light certain things, but, a wedding in the ballroom of a lower ground ballroom of a hotel.
Well, let's talk about that, because I know the story you're gonna talk about now. And yeah, I think it was, expectation versus reality. So perhaps, we live in a world of Instagram where brides and grooms and families and parents come to us and they say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're looking to achieve. So perhaps, I know the story, tell everybody the story.
So I think there is, look, you're right when you say expectation versus reality, and Instagram and Pinterest are not necessarily our friends when it comes to planning an event. So yeah, I mean, there's been a few occasions over the years. One comes to mind that I know is the one that you're thinking of, whereby there was an event held. It was a party, and it was held in a London ballroom in one of the top hotels in the world in winter. No natural light whatsoever, and they'd actually styled the room to be very, very dark. That was part of the theme, part of the style. I think maybe it was just candle lit or something very dark. And of course, we shoot it in the best way that we can and light it beautifully and do all of these things. And I had assistants running around with certain lights and everything. And when it came to seeing the pictures afterwards, the client showed me a photo book from a holiday they'd had in the middle of summer to southern Italy, and said, why don't the pictures look like this?
Oh, yeah.
In daytime, with sunshine, outdoors, on a mountain. And I had to explain that actually, I can't make a lower ground floor ballroom in pitch darkness look the same as your summer in Sorrento, because they're not the same thing.
No, it's not apples for apples.
Exactly that. And I think sometimes clients say, look, can you shoot like this? Can you shoot like that? And I say nowadays, look, of course, but it's down to also the space, the styling, the theme of what you're doing. It's down to those raw ingredients that photographers need to be able to capture things in a certain way.
Yeah. In terms of the sort of collections and packages you offer, where do you sort of sit in terms of, let's take a wedding, pricing aside, because weddings have different pricing depending on size and etc. I understand that, but what does sort of a basic wedding package collection look like for you? What does it include?
So it's taken years to get to the point where, and we all refine what we do, right? Every year, every
Always,
year. We're
always.
always refining on what clients need and what clients want and what most people. So I think for me, there's certain things that are really important, specifically with a wedding. You're asking about weddings, specifically with a wedding. The first one is to do a pre-wedding shoot. So that is, for me, pretty much always included and important. It's
important because you get the opportunity to meet with the clients first, have that informal chat, get a bit of rapport.
Right, 100%. And actually to see them on camera. And I think everyone's different as a person to how they are on camera. Most people are. Some people seize up when they're on camera. Some people really can't express themselves because they get nervous, they get anxious. Some people you can look at and think they're absolutely, truly photogenic and beautiful, and they'll have their own hang-ups with some physical feature they might have. Right?
I funnily enough, just remember being told by a bride on the morning of her wedding, please, whatever happens, do not shoot me from my left-hand side for the whole day.
Right.
Which is a very difficult thing to do. Bearing in mind it's live,
Very difficult.
and you're telling everybody to be in position for things, but to not shoot someone from the left is tricky. We can deal with it in post-production to sort of make sure the angles. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, those things, they're so important. Everybody has hang-ups. That's the truth of it. I mean, the majority of people. And then especially when you're looking at a couple, you're thinking, okay, what makes them tick? What's their chemistry? How do they stand when they're together? The first thing I ever do on a pre-wedding shoot is I say, have you guys ever had a moment where you are on holiday or at a wedding and you've asked a friend to take a picture of you? You've given them your phone and you've said, quick, take a picture of us. What happens? Show me what happens. Show me naturally how you fall together. And that's the first thing that we do. So as you know and I know, on a wedding day, the kind of weddings that we shoot are not typically the most relaxed necessarily. There's lots going on and there's lots of demands on the time and the timetable. And you're given a very small period of time to photograph the couple and to produce pictures they're going to love for the rest of their life. And hopefully that, future generations will love as well. And I think having had that test run, if you like, to go and do a pre-wedding shoot in a park a few weeks before the wedding or in the place where they got engaged or anything like that, I think it's actually priceless to have that test shoot. So that's something that we'll always include.
Let's take a little walk through some of your photography, because it's up on the screens here for everybody to see. I asked you for a selection of stuff that you were... I'm sure you're proud of every single shot you've taken, but it's hard to narrow that down perhaps to sort of 20 or 30. So we've got a little selection here. Talk me through this image and why you sort of sent me this one specifically.
So actually, before we move on from this image, this is, firstly, it's iconic. And the fact that you've got this wonderful wedding ceremony and the chuppah happening right in front of Tower Bridge, I think it's an amazing picture and it says lots of things. So, there's numerous pieces of information in this shot. That's the bride, the groom, the structure, the flowers, Tower Bridge. It places it in the environment, the guests. There's so much going on. I think the other thing, and actually I knew that you might ask about this at some point, so I'm going to jump in there as well. And you asked before about what's included in a wedding package. Is more than one photographer.
Okay.
So
Teams. Yeah.
So this image, if you look very carefully, what you'll see on the left-hand side is me.
Yes.
Which means I didn't shoot this picture.
So one of your favourite shots was shot by a member of your team. But that's the point, isn't it, of having... I mean, way before... When I first met you, a photographer was a photographer and he might have an assistant. But I feel like you were one of the first to have a team where it didn't matter whether whether you could be there or not be there, because the strength of your team is so exceptional. And in fact, testimony to that, you remember the job we did in Greece a few years ago.
I wish I was there.
Well, where the client wanted to have a top photographer and you weren't available for the shoot. And they scoured literally the whole of Europe looking for a top photographer. And I said, listen, Blake's team is more than capable of... And we work with them and they couldn't have been happier with their selection.
Pictures are amazing.
The pictures were just incredible. And your team were a dream to work with.
I had major FOMO that entire weekend.
I'm sure.
Major.
It was a fabulous few days.
So yeah, I'm in this picture. I'm doing something else, and a colleague of mine who actually was a photography mentor of mine, somebody who trained me, took this shot. And I love it as a picture, and I think actually you're right, that importance of teams. Certainly at a wedding, the last thing you want is photographers sprinting from one side of the room to the other and causing a big scene and a fuss and all that, just because they need to cover two angles. It's much better to have somebody quietly here, and just to make sure that you can tell as much of the story as you can.
We could do a whole episode on photographers running around, and you could do a whole episode on videographers getting in your way. Something which I'm proud to say doesn't necessarily happen between us, because that's the value of having people that sort of know each other well.
Absolutely.
And even if there's two teams, actually we're just one team serving the best purpose for the client. Exactly. Let's move on to the next image. Here we go. A beautiful wedding. Where is this?
So this is in a venue called Chateau Saint-Georges in the south of France. And very beautiful place. It's quite iconic. It's known for the tower.
Yeah.
So this was the first dance, and you've got a few lovely details in there through these kind of outdoor hanging chandeliers. I wanted to make sure that I framed it in a way that really places the shot. So with the first dance, you can shoot very, very close up and get that very intimate shot, or sometimes you can shoot wider and you can see what's going on around the place. And I know that this tower was part of this couple's wedding invitation. Like, it was a really iconic
It was a thing.
It was
Yeah.
a thing. It was a thing. So there we are in darkness. We'd set up remote control lighting around the sides of the dance floor, which actually hit perfectly on the bride's face on this one. And, sometimes things have to go for you. So obviously I'm in position and I'm ready and prepared, and compositionally everything's set, light-wise everything's set. Equally, the couple could have faced the other way for 90% of the time.
Yeah,
so
it's all live.
It's all live.
Nobody's
It's all live.
no director standing there saying cut.
Exactly that.
Everybody
but I think
move.
This has three pillars of everything that I try and do, and that I think all good photographers try and do in pictures. Number one is composition. I think the composition's really solid. They're right in the middle. You look straight towards her face, and it's even the building behind. It's all kind of composed
it's all
nicely.
beautifully.
And the light and the moment. It's a great moment.
It is. Let's look at the next one. I love this shot. This is beautiful.
So this is Grandma blessing her granddaughter just before she was about to go and get married. The granddaughter getting married, not the grandmother.
Yeah, sure.
And it's just a real, real moment. And actually, this picture...
This could be on a wall in a gallery, is how I look at this picture. For me, and by the way, the fact also that it's in black and white and you've played with the contrast a little, just feels to me just gallery.
It's full
Gallery
of feeling.
shot.
It's
Yeah.
full of feeling.
Full of
And I think
emotion.
that is, sometimes all a picture needs is feeling. I think this has other things going for it too, but it's got so much feeling in it that's the absolute crux of this. And I'll tell you, that picture, I don't know whether I should fully admit this, but I will fully admit this because, I'm talking to Gav. And
Yeah.
This is full disclosure time.
Yeah.
It's not 100% in focus.
Okay.
And you probably can't see that on the screen, but it's not.
I can't see with my
100%,
glasses from here.
Well, there we go. It's not. And actually, sometimes like that really is okay. We live in this digital era of everything being perfectly super pin sharp and digitally focused and everything else. And sometimes something like that, like, it's actually okay that it's ever so slightly not, and it's got real feeling and depth to it, and it's got so much that is one of my favourites as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of your favourites also because you're a thinker. As we know each other well. You are a thinker. You are a writer as well. You do lots of writing,
Yeah.
and that's something you'd maybe like to sort of focus on in the future. But I think that sort of comes through for me in your photography as well. That you're a thinker. Let's have a look at the next one. It's another gorgeous, big, wide room shot from above. Sorry that we've popped ourselves across the left of it. Where was this?
Here we are. This was at Old Billingsgate.
Of course, I think I recognise there as the pillars.
Yeah, exactly that. So I think, again, storytelling. And we would have had a photographer right at the front. In fact, I think you can probably see a photographer right at the front there.
Yeah.
If we look, very, very carefully, we can see a photographer right at the front. And at that point, I took myself off upstairs. I knew that my team had things covered downstairs. And I knew that actually this kind of shot was absolutely key to telling the story of the evening. And, when you look through a collection of pictures, what I want my clients to see is I want them to see everything from the tiny details of a close-up of people holding hands all the way through to a shot like this that probably has 100 people in the picture,
Yeah.
and where you're really storytelling. And at that moment, is it luck? I don't know. You make your own luck in some ways, but the fact that the bride and groom are having such a beautiful moment together in the light there, I probably took 200 clicks of the camera to get this one, so maybe it's not luck.
And this comes back to strength of the team as well, because if you are an event photographer and you're down amongst the guests, typically you're thinking, do I have time to rush upstairs? What happens if something goes on down here?
Absolutely.
And I know sometimes when we turn up at events and maybe there's 3 photographers and potentially a large one, 3 videographers, very important that and I feel that the teams know each other and understand each other for exactly these types of reasons, because you can spread yourself. You can tap me on the shoulder and say, can we just move the videographers to a wider position, please? Just for a minute, there's a shot I want to do. And hey, it's no problem because we're all there kind of, as I said, working for that greater good. Here's another wonderful shot.
Again, all feeling, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's a real moment. And I remember actually at the end of this wedding day was particularly notable because, honestly, for loads of reasons. But I remember I got to the venue super early, 8 a.m. or something like that. And we were still shooting with the bride and groom at another venue after the wedding. We were still shooting until about 4 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Doing some amazing portraits of them. So it was a very, very long day, an amazing day, but a long day. I wasn't tired at the end because we were actually buzzing, myself and my team, who were still there at 4 a.m. And I remember actually getting back home at whatever it was, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning the next day, and going through the pictures immediately, and I saw this. And it just struck me like it's such a strong moment. And actually, there's not loads of context in this picture. You can't see what the bride's looking at.
No.
But
It's just a face of joy, isn't it?
right,
Yeah.
right, it really is. And there's something very powerful in taking something that passes, these moments that pass, and capturing it, and it lives on. And it's, for me, it's such a powerful thing.
Moving on, here's the famous stamping your foot down on a glass at a Jewish ceremony. Where was this one, Blake?
So this was in France. This was the same couple as the tower, the first dance with the tower. And I think what I love about this, there's a few things actually. The first one is
the concentration on getting the foot in the right place.
Exactly
wow,
that.
Yeah.
The concentration. Nobody's looking at the camera, which I love. There's obviously the timing of this shot is perfect. I clearly took a few clicks either side of this shot being clicked, but the timing's great. And I think also what happens, and we've both been in these situations before, is this shot is not a given. For anybody who is photographing or filming a Jewish wedding, there's absolutely nothing to say that you will achieve a picture of the bride or the groom smashing a glass, because anything can happen. It's a live event. I've had it before where the glass has been placed down in front of the groom and they're singing just before that happens, and everyone's in position and I'm crouching on the floor and we're all ready and everyone's set, and at that exact moment, family members come up to give a blessing and stood 6 inches away from the bride and groom, and then the glass has been smashed and nobody's caught that on camera. Nothing's a given. I take nothing for granted at all. So actually to have this where the rabbi and the chazan stand slightly to the side, and you've got not only that moment completely unobstructed, but you've got the beautiful chuppah around it. It's a very rare shot, actually.
It is, absolutely. It's a beautiful image. Love the flowers there. I remember this wedding. This was Carly
was
and
this our
Jonathan.
first ever wedding together?
I think it was our first ever wedding together.
I think it was.
Yeah, Carly and Jonathan.
And we did a pre-shoot and an interview in Hyde Park.
That's right, we did. A beautiful
and the dress
shot.
fitting. We did the dress fitting together in Chelsea. Didn't fit either of us.
No,
unfortunately.
sadly, and it definitely wouldn't now. Beautifully, the lighting.
So I do love this shot. Do you remember which room this was taken in? It was at the Dorchester. Do you remember which room?
Well, I'm going to tell you. 10 years ago, I would have remembered because my brain does. Once I got past 50, I can't remember the details of a room. Gone. Where was it?
So the downstairs room, not the piano, but next to there. It's
Okay.
in there. So the name of it escapes me now, but the scene looked nothing like this.
Well, that room's completely bland, and it's usually got boxes and other
There were
bits and
boxes,
pieces.
all the lights were on,
Yeah.
it was full of people. The bride happens to take a seat just in front of the window. And as I say, she was fully lit. It was like that. It was a fully light, bright
Daylight
room.
shot.
And what I did, and actually I was quite proud of this one at the time, was, like the kind of room dividers, the concertina room dividers.
Sure.
So I hid half the camera lens behind one of those. The left-hand side of the camera lens
I can
is
see
hidden
that
behind
now.
a room divider. And essentially just exposed just for the absolute highlights in the shot. So made the entire shot as dark as it could
possible,
be, knowing that actually that little bit of light is just going to come and light up just the veil, the side of the face, if Carly looked this way, which thankfully she did. Again, luck maybe. And it was one of those. It looked nothing like.
And for me, Blake, this is why I love you. This is why when I look at your photography, or when clients ask about photographers at various different levels, because you can't put everybody forward for every level, everyone has different budgets, but in the budget that you are, top tier, the quality of photography, the thought and thinking that goes behind your shots, I feel is what stands you apart.
Thank you.
And that's just a perfect example of thoughtfulness, thinking, the moment. I mean, that is a brightly exposed. I know exactly the room with all the windows from Park Lane flooding in.
Yeah, blandly lit, brightly exposed. I mean, I think that you mentioned just thought and thinking and that process. And I think actually sometimes I'm telling photographers, look, slow down. Don't be, what's it called, run and gun. Don't just go around and slow down. And actually sometimes you'll see me quite often probably walking around events with a face that's actually just concentrating.
Or
I'm
do you
not
remember with the
miserable, I'm not
crystal?
tired, I'm just looking.
Do you remember you walking around with the crystal with the glass you used to put up in front of your camera lens?
Sometimes I still do, grabbing all sorts of stuff to put in front of the lens.
Wow. Flying high.
Flying high. So again, a risk. And this was, once again, this was abroad, a beautiful destination wedding. And just before all of the Jewish dancing was going to start and everything was going to kick off and go mad. And again, we've spoken already today about strength of team and risky shots and what allows you to go into certain places. I decided to go up the tower that I was mentioned before and shoot the Jewish dancing from up the tower on a long lens looking down. And it was a complete risk. I can admit that now. I knew that I had my colleague down on ground level, and I'd already briefed him and said, look, I'm going to go and shoot from up there. You need to cover this, this, and this, on the kind of the more expected shots, in that sense that the bride and groom know that they're going to have. And it was a total risk. And I knew that there were certain things that I'd be able to achieve from up there that are rare, because you can't do that in most venues. And you can't do that in, any normal ballroom or anything like that. I mean, I was way above the action. And thankfully, this happened. And even more thankfully, I managed to nail the focus of the shot and get the right context and everything else. And it's actually a shot that, again, just it stands out because it is so rare. You don't see that.
The one thing I do know about having worked with you for many years is a lot of the detail of the planning is so meticulously done prior. Your notes are comprehensive. I know that when we've done certain jobs together, we have lots of meetings prior where we run through the running order, talk about who's going to be where. Usually at these events, because I'm not holding a camera, I may be the contact point to tell my team and your team at the same time if there's a slowing down, if something's happening, if someone's moving outside. But the planning is so important, isn't it, for photography and film?
It is. I think, when you click, it's almost the end of the process. There's so much that goes in before, whether that's gently manipulating a certain situation to be in a certain place, or whether that's the planning and timings. And as you said, you're not really holding a camera on these events, so you take that director role.
Yeah.
Whereas I kind of take the director role as well as being a primary photographer. So for me, it's just key that my notes are so ridiculously detailed that none of my team at any point need to ask me anything.
I mean, I remember specifically maybe one of the last weddings that certainly we did was a few months ago in Scotland, which we did together. Meticulously planned, amazing wedding with Ruby J, which was incredible. But the planning of detail over that weekend, the strength of the teams that we put out just means that the client ends up with incredible photography, a film that they'll treasure for the rest of their lives. And we come away saying, job well done.
Well, that's it. And actually, job well done. It never, it's funny, as much as we plan, man plans, God laughs, right? As much as we plan, I find that, certainly at a wedding, nothing ever goes completely to plan.
Of course
that doesn't
not.
happen.
It's live, yeah.
It's live, but you can plan as well as possible, and you can look at certain circumstances and really try and plan as much as you can. I think with that one, for me, wherever I am, I have to be able to switch off from what's going on elsewhere. Because if I am primary photographer at an event and whoever I'm with, that needs to be my focus in terms of the room, as well as pulling certain strings and talking to the planner and working out certain things behind the scenes. But yeah, for that reason, everyone needs to know their job and their brief and their shot lists, and as much as they can.
Where was this one?
This was a Giants marquee in Hertfordshire, actually. It was a 7-day Indian wedding.
Amazing.
And as part of the Indian wedding, there is a process where the bride, who has lived with her family until that point, essentially says goodbye to them and leaves the venue, and the family will kind of almost flank either side towards the door, and it never fails to be emotional.
Yeah,
that's the truth of it. I think this is made by certain things. I know that we're slightly over it on the left, but her first cousin shedding a tear on the left with a tissue to her face is beautiful. And this is
gorgeous.
Grandpa saying goodbye.
I mean, look at this. I know, sorry, we're covering up your photography.
Oh, good. This was Babington House.
Yeah, beautifully backlit shot, lots of smoke and atmosphere. I mean, the lighting of these events, people just assume we walk into a room, take out cameras and everything's all good. But I know if you hold up an iPhone in any one of these rooms and you took a picture, it would just be a blur of blue or overexposed,
Absolutely.
pink.
Yeah.
So to get these shots is something special.
It's not easy. That's the truth of it. And actually, sometimes the more production and the more lighting that goes into
I remember that room.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
The more production and lighting that goes into a room, sometimes the more difficult it is for us, because you have to overpower that, or you have to.
Well, that's a classic example. That very strong, harsh LED pink doesn't work well with cameras necessarily, does it?
No, exactly. So that has been, it's been edited to a pleasant level.
Yeah. We've showed this before. Strictly
overexposure.
Charlotte, one of my favourite photographs.
This was incredible.
I love this. That was Claridge's. Okay. I'll take a picture of the shadows.
Absolutely. I mean, this was the lovely thing about this, and this is again as they're marching in the groom. This is an Indian wedding, marching in the groom with drums going and flares coming off and everything going mad. Is I just thought that it was a unique angle, and actually and I suppose that's weirdly enough harping back to my days of literally photographing riots, crime scenes, all that kind of stuff. Is that in the madness of everything, I think there's still unique angles to get, not just what's expected.
Yeah, absolutely. It's another beautiful sort of looking room shot. We featured this is also Claridge's, isn't it? That was a lovely ballroom by
Beverly
White
Hills
Paper,
Hotel,
Beverly Hills Hotel. This little secret venue, I will admit, hands up, I have used it for a video shoot as well. But Yeah. So talk me through this one. This is Izzy's bat mitzvah. God, many years ago. I think she's approaching 19 now.
Wow. Time flies.
Yeah, but this was a great venue, great location.
It was. This was a pre-shoot for her bat mitzvah. So again, we've spoken about weddings and doing a pre-shoot. I do the same for bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, and I think actually what it does is it allows us to produce a set of portraits, A, that can be used on the night on screens or save the dates or anything like that, but B, that just kind of marks the time in their life, marks that period of time in their life, which I think is really important. And so we wanted to do some cool portraits with Izzy, and I had this location in mind that was a secret location in the middle of nowhere. It's a
literally abandoned
dodgy,
building.
abandoned place.
Yep.
And so there we went with all of my studio lighting and with flares and smoke flares and all sorts of stuff. And I just think it's a super cool shot. I mean, I look at pictures in a certain way. I look at them as either I place myself in them or I place family in them. And I just think, if I had that, or if a kid had that, or one of my kids had that, would I be happy with it? And I just think actually it's a really cool, quite unusual picture.
Well, I know that's definitely ended up on the wall of Izzy's house.
There we go.
As a
the outside wall,
as a very big. But there's another one that when I work with you, I'm sometimes and I see the photography, my jaw drops for all sorts of reasons, and this is one which actually you didn't send me. I pulled out of our archive.
Go on.
Because this shot I think is unbelievable for all the right reasons. So this was Ben's bar mitzvah, and I believe the story is you turned up to do a photo shoot, and of course Ben's parents are expecting him to put on his suit and have a lovely shoot, and he was just in a very nice way. He loves football, and he was having none of it. So the sun was setting, and you did what?
So it's a cool shot. It's a cool shot.
Which is also on a giant acrylic in their home.
Yeah. So what did we do? I think firstly, Ben wanted to be in his football kit, and I thought, well, that's amazing, right? So again, we had time. There was time scheduled in on another day to go and do pictures of him in a synagogue and to have pictures of him at his party. And I thought, again, it's a time in their life, right? And as you know, having kids, it moves very quickly. So if this is the time in his life, and if he's in his Tottenham kit playing football in his garden every afternoon,
and that's what he loves to do,
that is what we should be doing, and that's what we should be focusing on. So again, looking back at experiences that I've had in the past, like I've done sports shoots for different companies and different advertising agencies and things like that. So I just wanted to actually produce something that was up there and could be used with a professional sporting company. It could be a Nike advert, it could be whoever it might be. And I wanted to produce something that's not, inverted commas, bar mitzvah photography, but that's actually something else.
What's the favourite part of any event for you? Is there a favourite?
Seeing your face there, Gav. That's the only one.
That's usually one of my. I do get a bit of it. We've talked about it in previous episodes. Event anxiety.
Yeah.
I definitely do find I suffer from that a little bit.
It's a thing. I think because we are in roles where so many things are out of our control, I think it's absolutely natural to have that. And I still have it. I absolutely have it. So so many things can happen, and I said before, you never take anything for granted that you're going to get a certain shot. So, I mean, in terms of my favourite part of an event, it's interesting. I always, when I know I've got some shots that my clients will love under my belt, right? When I know that actually
got some winners.
Things are going okay.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm enjoying myself, even if my face may not look like it because I'm walking around concentrating on what's the next angle or whatever. But yeah, I think, that, and also, as I said before, putting yourself in certain pictures, that picture that you showed before of the grandmother and the bride, like, I wish I had a picture. Both of my grandmas have passed away, as in recent history.
Yeah.
I wish I had anything that was a beautiful picture with either of them.
Yeah.
And, you put yourself into there. And actually, if you're producing something for someone that you would absolutely treasure for yourself, at that point, you realise the value in what you're doing.
I think for me, the event anxiety really comes out only for me on weddings. And that's because the days are unbelievably long. They can stop early hours of the morning. Mm-hmm. By the time you get to the chuppah at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, you've done a day's work and you've got everything to come. I generally tend to breathe once the ceremony is out the way because of the logistics of everything.
Yeah.
So we, like yourself, would work with teams to make sure that the person shooting the groom prep doesn't have to beat the groom necessarily to the venue. Someone's at the venue taking care of things. Someone's looking after the bride. And that coming together after the ceremony, knowing that it's all done, for me, I find that's the moment to sort of know we can enjoy the rest of the evening. Because we do enjoy the parties.
We do. We do, but it's interesting. That's when you breathe. For me, we're talking specifically in this instance about
weddings,
Jewish weddings, I suppose.
Yes, it is,
And when the photos happen and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, not English weddings, any other weddings. No issue at all. It's just the amount of stuff that goes into the Jewish weddings in terms of the length of the day.
Yeah, and the timings are super tight. So at that point that the ceremony's finished, all of your team's there and you're breathing. I'm then given 40 minutes to do 50 family group shots and portraits of the couple that they'll love forever.
Well, that's a question from
And
Instagram later. We'll come to that one. Celebrities is a thing for you as well.
It is. Yeah.
Not that this is necessarily about events, but I did want to showcase you've shot some very, very famous people across the years, haven't you?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not necessarily massively into, I don't know, for want of a better phrase, celebrity culture myself.
No, that's fair
right?
enough. Yeah.
But yes, maybe that's from photographing a lot of these people over. The
You
course of the
even
last
managed to find
15 years.
Batman and
I
Robin.
found Batman and Robin
And the Riddler. Yeah. Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. So,
Outside number 10.
Yeah. This was a really interesting day. And with days like this, I mean, this is actually, looking at this picture, it also reminds me why I love events. Because the build-up to this moment was so huge in terms of journeying, in terms of waiting up on a stepladder for maybe 6 hours in a pre-marked position, all to have that opportunity of maybe 20 seconds as
Of
he
that
gets
one
out of his
shot.
car, the car that was known as the Beast. Do you remember that
Yes,
car?
yes,
He
yes.
gets out of his car and he shook hands with the Prime Minister, it was David Cameron at the time, and walked towards the door, waved and went inside, and it was all over.
Speaking of Prime Ministers,
Yes,
Bojo.
Bojo, many times.
Yeah.
We were stuck in a lift together once,
Were you?
myself and Bojo. We've been on dance floors together. Also,
Wasn't during lockdown, was it?
It wasn't. It wasn't during lockdown. He's great value to photograph.
Yeah.
Whatever your opinions are or are not on Bojo,
Yeah.
He knows the value of a picture.
Now, you mentioned and referenced riots earlier in the conversation. I think this picture sums up chaos.
Absolutely.
It could be an event, to be fair. Smoke bombs going off. But where was this?
This was Shaftesbury Avenue. So this was it 2011? Where there were the kind of concerted period of time where there was those London riots and the police were understaffed and
Yes.
everyone was getting looted. And I think, from memory, 2011. And I was on commission to photograph quite a few different places and quite a few things. And so again, you're photographing people who often don't want to be photographed. So that's a huge level of pressure compared to, let's say, an event, a private event, a wedding, where people generally are up for being on camera. And I was on commission for a few days to do that. I actually had, funnily enough, it reminds me, it was possibly that first wedding I ever shot, the day after this.
The day after.
And at the point at which a kind of paint splat or something came somewhere near me and my camera lens, I actually thought, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
Donna and Mark deserve better.
Absolutely. Wow. Our now king.
Yes.
You've been recently featured across the press as taking some gorgeous shots of King Charles.
So
What's it like to shoot the king?
It's great to shoot the king, actually. I mean, for me, you know me well enough to know that I very rarely stop and bask in anything. As in, people do you appreciate that? It's that, you never appreciate a moment until it becomes a memory, right? So when I'm at an event or when I'm shooting and I'm concentrating and I'm trying to do the best I can. And I very rarely, and again, should I admit this or not? I don't really know. I very rarely, I feel, do the best that I can. As in, there's always a reason that makes things tricky or difficult, or whether that's a lack of time or space or light or permission or whatever it might be.
Life isn't perfection.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're aiming
we
for
seek
that.
perfection. Yeah.
Exactly, we do. So, even in those instances of photographing King Charles and many times photographing Prince Charles, you're always trying to achieve something that might not be possible, whether that's because of royal security needing you to be ahead of the game and to be a certain distance away, or whether that's because of people in the room. It could be anything. So it's an absolute privilege to have photographed him and to continue to do so, that's for sure.
And of course you shot his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II.
Many times. This was the first. And it was...
What a privilege.
Very massive privilege. And you appreciate that more now than ever, but it was in my very early days of being a news photographer. And long story short, again, you never know what you're going to get, right? You never know exactly whether she may look towards you, whether she may not, whether the sun might come out and ruin that exact moment. And remember, we're not using automatic settings. Everything's manually done and everything else. You just never quite know. And so in my first kind of 2 weeks of being a full-time news photographer, that happened. And I just remember when I saw the picture, and it was really one of the best moments of my career, for sure.
Wow. We have asked the audience on our Instagram account, and I know you did as well, to pop in some questions they'd like to ask you, because lots of people had questions for you, Blake. This could be a 3-hour show, to be perfectly honest. This is from Ben. Ben is actually one of our camera boys, as you know. What's the most magical moment for you at an event? Is there a magical moment?
You know what? Without dodging the question,
Yeah.
I don't think there's one. I think, and actually, the interesting thing about that, and the same as I said before, nothing ever goes to plan, right? You can have a shot list, and it could be that a couple of the shots on that shot list are just impossible. They can't be done for whatever reasons out of your control. But what you don't see coming is the other magical ones that you didn't plan on that happen, that are actually, way more powerful than some of those on the list. So I don't think there's one extra magical moment, but I think there can be many.
Yeah. From Anne Reed 1917, what's the biggest surprise you've ever seen at a party?
Wow, again, that's massive. I mean, we've seen some amazing things. I say we
Unbelievable.
because actually at a lot of the biggest parties I photograph, you've also been there.
Yeah.
From celebrity appearances to, kabuki drops.
Kabuki
Is that
drops,
what they're-
room reveals, yeah.
Room reveals.
I mean, at the wedding in Scotland, the groom surprised the bride by getting up and singing and playing guitar. That was...
became part of the band. That was quite amazing.
Yeah.
We've seen before all sorts of different people and animals come down the aisle, whether that's, toddlers in kind of a remote control mini Mercedes, or whether that's the dog coming down the aisle with flowers.
Next question from Joanna Hatman. How important is the size of the photographer's team?
I think it's massively important. I think it's key. And actually, there's plenty of times when we won't shoot a certain event without a certain size of team. And it might be that a client's been to somebody else who said, I can do this single-handedly. That's fine. And then I'm there saying, look, actually, we need 3 people because you've got 3 locations and you've got the gallery and you've got all of this. I'm looking at your timetable and I'm telling you that's what we need. And I almost liken it, strangely enough, to, you wouldn't say to the caterers, look, we need you to feed 500 guests, but we only want you to bring 1 chef.
Absolutely.
They would tell you how many chefs are needed to create that food to feed those people.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I don't want everybody to be running around and sprinting around the venue all day.
Yeah.
We need to be ahead of the game of what's going on. As you know, also people love an establishing shot. So you want to show the room, or you want to show the building, you want to show these things before everyone comes in.
Yeah.
I think it's key. And I actually think that what it does is it allows me, as we spoke about before, possibly to be the calmest person in the room, knowing that certain things are covered.
I think when we go and speak to clients initially, and it's typically for large weddings as well, where they may be discussing budget with you and the costs of the event to film, and you then explain, well, the bride's in a location, the groom's in a separate location, so that's 2 of the team taken up. You've got a ceremony being built somewhere, which you're going to want filmed and done properly. You've got a ballroom being filmed and done properly. Yeah. So when guests arrive at the one location, you want to have a photographer or videographer there. It's very easily determined. And I feel it almost, well, in a funny way, you and I have discussed it before. Sometimes at these weddings, no questions, we're the cheapest thing there. However expensive people think we are, the budgets are far larger for flowers than they are for the video. The video guys will work, or the photographers will work all day into the night, and then the work begins. We may have 2 or 3 weeks worth of work ahead of that.
I think it's almost, and I think also when we've discussed it, we've looked at, what we bring to the day.
Yes.
We bring, maybe I bring a bit more, I'm calm and I can read a room and whatever, but we don't bring a lot to the day.
Yeah.
We don't, let's face it, we're not entertainment.
Yep.
We can't be eaten. Where people don't look at us and think that looks pretty. We don't bring a lot to the day. But we are all you're left with. And so actually, I think, look, you're absolutely right. And I think in terms of a size of team, you're right. I think it's hugely important that you have the right amount of people there to do the best job that you can for your clients to enjoy for the rest of their life.
But that also does come down to budget and budget related, because there are plenty of people that don't necessarily have the budgets of the world that sometimes we get to film in. And equally, there are some amazing photographers and amazing videographers but you can't expect the level of film in the same way as a single man videographer or a single photographer. You'll
Exactly
get what you
that.
get.
One person can only do what one person can do.
Yeah, exactly. Blake, the next question is, how important is a relationship between photographer and videographer at an event?
I think it's vital.
Vital.
Yeah. I think actually what we're doing is not, I know it might sound ever so slightly cliche, but the truth of it is, it's not for us. It's for our clients to have forever, right? So what we want to do is really achieve the best we can. And sometimes some of the pictures that we looked at before have events that we shot together, some were not together. The ones that weren't together, some of those I actually remember the videographers having a completely different way of working than myself. So, for example, a couple would book me because they know that I can be unobtrusive, I can stand back, I can shoot with a slightly longer lens that allows them just to enjoy their moment and be themselves and have the best day ever, knowing that I'm capturing it. The problem is then if a videographer is filming it, let's say on a very wide lens, and the videographer is
Right up close,
a foot, and so if they are a foot away from the bride and groom or the couple, where do I need to be? Also there. And it changes the style of my shots, the way I shoot, what I'm able to shoot, the experience of the couple.
I think the synergies between photography and video need to be absolutely aligned for some of these events, because for me, all we are working for is for the client and to make sure they have the best possible outcome.
Always.
And that is made infinitely more difficult. And it's not that photographers and video don't necessarily get on. They always do. I know certainly when I go to an event and we know there's a photographer there, I would have either rung them before, or I would go up on the day and introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Gavin, my team's filming today. If they get in your way, just give them a little tap on the shoulder and try and make things all really lovely. Anything you want to tell us, or, I'll be keeping an eye on things, just, please come and tell me. And I think a great example of where that doesn't work is we shot a very, very big wedding a little while ago, quite a few years ago actually, and it was a team of 3 photographers. And just the main thing I talked to around all the cameras around where the ceremony was taking place, said, but our main shot is right down the aisle, and by the way, no issue, as you know. What do I say? Step in, no worries, but if possible, could you just not stand there for 5 minutes while you look through the photographs you've just taken? And they had 3 photographers, and at the moment of the stamping on the glass, all 3 photographers for 5 minutes stood right down the aisle, right in front of the main shot, and stood there on 3 different lenses.
Why?
Taking the pictures. I don't know, but what I'm saying is these things do happen, and of course we had maybe other angles to get it from, but it just shows the synergies. That doesn't happen with us, unless it's all the guests step out into the aisle, which does happen with our iPhones.
Happen, yeah.
You have to move. Typically speaking, at a wedding, we never move.
Yeah.
We're static. We stay, and that way you can always sort of move around.
Yeah, we're a bit
us.
more mobile in that sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, it's tricky, but look,
Yeah, it's tricky.
I think the synergy is key, and it's everybody has to know that we're not there for ourselves.
Absolutely.
It always makes me laugh when people say the photographer's shots. They're not my shots. They're yours, and equally the video is of the client. Right? We just need to do the best we can for them.
Photographers with an assistant holding a giant flash on a stick. Necessary? ? I've seen this at events quite a lot. I find it infinitely frustrating, but equally as a professional, I think why they're doing it, but you don't do it.
I don't do it. Is it necessary? I mean, look, everybody has a different way of working, right? I think it's useful. It's definitely useful. That's for sure, in terms of throwing lights where it needs to be lit.
Yeah.
I mean, what we try and do something slightly different, have remote control lights in different places around the room, or to work with ambient light as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily essential. I think it does visually look very cumbersome. So that's an issue for you if you're looking at a wide shot of a dance floor and you've literally got somebody, lifting photography equipment in the air above people dancing.
In a world where you want to be, not noticed and reportage in style and standing back. I mean, people are going to see people holding cameras, but cameras generally speaking are quite small.
Yeah.
I mean, I see a couple of people holding big broadcast cameras on dance floors. I'm still amazed that happens. Yeah. But when photographers are standing there and they've got an assistant, and the assistant is holding a ginormous flash above their heads, I just wonder if that's still necessary. And I'm not a photographer, so
I think different styles for different people. I think that's what it is. Like, as I say, it's cumbersome, and I think that when you're in the middle of the madness on the dance floor, actually what you want to be is as kind of supple as possible in terms of not having all of that kit there, and that's what we try and do.
Yep. Next question is what cameras do you use and why? Are you Nikon or Canon? You're Nikon.
I'm Nikon. I've always been Nikon. Not for any reason apart from, the first camera I got was a Nikon, and you get used to it and the operating system and the way it feels. And you a lot of people stick with a brand.
And you buy your lenses.
You buy your lenses and they stick with a brand. But Nikon mirrorless cameras nowadays, Z7 IIs to be precise.
Yeah.
And no camera is perfect, but for what I do, they are extremely good.
How hard is it to organise the family photographs for large groups? That's always a moment of chaos, potentially, at a wedding.
Potentially.
Hard to deal with sometimes?
Is it hard to deal with? Again, different approaches. Yes, objectively, it's hard to deal with sometimes. it's something that I cope with very, very well, and that I never really show levels of stress in or anything like that, because actually I know that I'm doing the best I can, and I know that I've got a disposition that can deal with that and that does it as well as humanly possible. I'm very good at politely shouting at people, as you know, right?
I find it the funniest time in the wedding, actually.
I'm glad you can laugh at it.
Well, because I don't have a camera in my hand, so I can step back, and sometimes maybe, if there's a Toastmaster there, or I can, help organise. But seeing the chaos of where's Auntie? She's at the bar. What? She needs to be in here. Where's our cousins?
So I think it's prep again, right? Everybody needs to know. Everyone who's in those pictures needs to know where they need to go before time, ahead of time. And I think the other thing for me is I'm quite quick. So if we've got a list of 20 different combinations, I want everybody who's in any of those pictures to be there before the first shot happens. And I will run through them beautifully and quickly. I think when you get to the point that we're on picture 9 and we've got to go and get that person from the bar for picture 10, at that point what you're doing is you're wasting the couple's time, which on a day as precious as a wedding day is a bit of a sin. So it's all about prep in advance. It's all about knowing who needs to be where, and shouting very politely. Yeah, beautiful. Let's get to the next question. What's your favourite venue for a wedding in London? Oh, great question. I mean, there are many amazing ones. I'm most regularly, I suppose, for weddings, I find myself at Claridge's. I was going to say Claridge's was my favourite venue. It's an amazing place. It's so classy. I quite like it. I mean, we're blessed to be at lots of incredible places. Yeah, Claridge's is beautiful to shoot. I also find with Claridge's it's quite compact, actually. So in terms of where our crew room might be, where we've got our field office, if you like, versus where the ballroom is, versus where the portraits might be, nowhere's a 10-minute walk. And I think at Claridge's as well, you've got that incredible team of Mathilde, of Catherine, it's so seamless there. It's done so well. They're so top of their game. Yeah, pretty amazing. Is there one wedding that stands out for being a little bit different? Great question. Have you shot like a wedding on a beach where they just didn't have anything and it was just a bit... I mean, I've shot lots of different types of things. I think that my role really is to find the uniqueness in every wedding and every couple and every family and bring that out as much as I can in the pictures. So genuinely, I could sit here and name every couple whose wedding I've ever photographed. So for me, actually, there's uniqueness and there's differences in everything. In terms of something that's very, very different, there's been many. I photographed a beautiful wedding in Morocco a few years ago that was different, again, for where it was and the architecture and the place and the surroundings of the ceremony. I photographed, I know we were just talking about Claridge's, my first ever male gay wedding was actually last year at Claridge's, and that in itself was stunning, just to be in those surroundings for a wedding of an American couple who come over to here. So I think that there's uniqueness in every wedding, and I know that doesn't exactly answer the question, but it's a good stab. Blake, it's been fabulous having you in. We've actually run out of time. If I tell you I had 16 pages of questions to ask you, and I think I did none. So we'll have to get you back for another episode 2. Let's do it in another season. Love to. But it's been fabulous having you with us today. If you've enjoyed this season of The Secret World of Events, then do give us a like and a subscribe. You can find us on YouTube to watch all the images that have been coming through. And of course, you can find us on all your usual podcast channels. That's it for season 1, and we'll look forward to seeing you again on The Secret World of Events. Great to have you here.
I had decided I wanted to get into events.
Don't rush into anything.
Left university and pretty much went straight into it.
It's just got to happen. So do what you need to make it happen.
I've never been one to follow rules.
We've spent a lot of time together, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Always keeping up with trends and fads.
How do you manage that, the expectations versus the reality of budgeting?
It's always insightful to get a gauge as to what their reference point is with budget.
Pre-COVID, I didn't know what Zoom was.
Everything is done to a higher level.
That detail Jeremy and the band and the guys will go into, by definition, makes our life easier.
There's levels and levels, and that comes in the detail.